Welcome to the Rabbit Hole Show with Charlie Armour and Angie McLean. Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter at Studio Burrow.
All right, Charlie. So Wednesday, April 15th, we're joined again by another guest, Antonio Sanchez. Hello.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
We're doing pretty good. Just keeping busy and stuff. How are you doing with the whole isolation problem?
You know, I guess as well as we could be doing, my wife and I are hunkering down at home here in New York, and unfortunately, we live in Queens in a neighborhood called Jackson Heights, which is one of the hardest hit in New York. Yeah.
Because they're all cramped up, wasn't they? There's a lot in New York than other places.
There's a lot in New York,
yeah.
But in Queens, particularly within New York, there's a lot of immigrants. There's a lot of minorities living over here. It's it's a lot of working class people that can't afford to be quarantined for months.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Do they get any help?
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of illegals too. So illegal aliens, as they call them here, but basically undocumented immigrants. They cannot request any kind of help.
Okay.
So, and also no health insurance. So that obviously to me is a huge mistake, because if you prevent those kind of people from trying to get help or trying to get treated, then you're keeping the virus alive.
Yeah,
but exactly. They need to help people.
Yeah,
if they like.
You know how our government, with our current president, Mr. Donald Trump, is treating immigrants and particularly undocumented immigrants. So obviously his policies are not helping in this particular situation.
No,
I don't think he's helping with anything, to be honest.
With anything, yeah.
Just him on his own. He wants to help himself.
Yeah, that's become obvious from the get-go. But when you were talking about the pandemic, I don't think it's because I used to think, it's so unfortunate to have this guy who is so unprepared, so ignorant, and so unwilling to learn as president right now, when we have the worst health crisis in our lifetime. But I think it's the other way around. I think it became the worst one of the worst health crises in our lifetime, because we have one of the most unprepared and ignorant leaders. Because the United States used to lead the way in a lot of these things, and other countries would follow. I remember when the Ebola crisis happened, the United States sent 10,000 people to investigate, to research before the virus even hit the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
So by the time it hit, the preparedness was in a completely different level. This time around, it was just complacency and denial from the get-go. So I think it got as bad as it has gotten because
I don't even think it's denial. No, I think it's actually they don't care, because it's money. They're going to lose money with all this, the economy. That's all they care about. So that's why they delayed everything.
Somebody that would have been a little bit more forward thinking would have been like, well, it's going to hit us worse later if we don't act now.
Why take the risk?
So
Common sense. Common sense. It's happened in the UK as well with Boris Johnson. He's done exactly the same thing. Waited far too long, and we've had around 11,000 deaths. So
yeah.
Where are you guys right now?
So I'm on a island called Prince Edward Island in Canada. It's the smallest province.
I'm in the UK, London. So.
Yeah. So here there's only 2 active cases, and a lot of that has to do with the leadership we have here. We started off with 26 active cases or 25 active cases, and then they've all recovered now. Now there's 2 known. and I feel very fortunate to have a good leadership program here. It's pandemic response team, I guess it would be.
Because they acted quick enough. Same with Germany, they did the same thing. They acted quick enough, and they haven't had as many deaths.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading the news yesterday that the government is supposed to send out all these checks to people that really need it, and they're behind on sending these checks.
Yeah.
But they're going to take a little longer because they requested to have Trump's name and signature printed on these checks, which is the first time in history that a president actual signature and name appear on Treasury checks. So the checks are being delayed even further because they want to put his name on them. I mean, it's just one.
I'm surprised he hasn't changed the coronavirus to his name, because then he'd get the attention.
He'd get royalties from it.
Yeah. I know.
Anyway, we're in rough shape over here, but all things considered, we're incredibly privileged to be able to just stay at home, and I have my home studio. I can still work, do some things, and I feel bad to complain when there's so many people that are in really, really rough shape right now.
Yeah, because they've got no money. They probably are illegal and they don't know what to do, so they're stuck. They are stuck.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because I feel lucky. Even though I'm not the richest person, I've got like the biggest house in the world. It's just I'm lucky, but there's others that have nothing, and I don't know how they're managing. Really. Yeah. So what would be your daily plan through this so far? What's your how are you keeping positive? What's your routine?
Who says I'm keeping positive?
I don't know. We're trying to. It's really hard.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, of course we're all trying. Because if
I'm
you
angry,
give in
to be honest.
I'm very angry, and I'm.
That's why I'm staying off Facebook, because I'm too angry.
Yeah, I mean, social media definitely can be a very harmful thing to go into nowadays.
And there's no point having a discussion with people online, because
there's no point.
It doesn't get anywhere. Yeah,
exactly. There's absolutely no point, and and it's usually kind of an echo chamber thing where you post something and people that you like and that like you, they post, oh yeah, you're totally right, and then there's usually one dissenting voice somewhere, and then everybody attacks him, and then he attacks everybody, and that's the end of it.
And then you don't get anywhere. It's like, what have we achieved from this?
Exactly nothing. So what I'm trying to do is just making music. I'm very lucky that I'm incredibly busy with a couple of things that I was doing already. So my original plan was, after I was in the middle of a tour with Pat Metheny, we were in Buenos Aires, Argentina, when all hell broke loose, and then the United States closed the borders with Europe. And then in a couple of days, everything completely got out of whack. We got canceled in Chile, Peru, Mexico, Cuba, Brazil. So then we were just trying to get home at that point. But I was already working on a film that I had just started. And I was also working on my upcoming record, which is a project that involves a lot of kind of high profile guests. And it's been taking a long time because of that. So, I was almost relieved in a way that I was going to be able to come home a little sooner and start working on these things. But to be honest, once I got home and I started working on these things, even though I have more time, I don't feel relieved one bit, which is weird. But I guess, that's just kind of the way I've always approached things.
Yeah.
I think I never have enough time to do whatever it is that I have, want, and need to do. But having said that, I'm lucky that I have those things that I have to do and that I need to kind of follow some kind of a schedule,
Yeah,
to
Yeah.
get things moving. And of course, working out is an important thing that I think it's hard to do because it's hard to find the motivation. When this is happening, usually you work out because you want to look good, and you want to look good because you want to go out and see people, and people are going to see you, and you get dressed. And when you don't have that kind of motivation, it's just hard to. It's like Groundhog Day on steroids. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what
We're basically in our pajamas at the moment, trying to look good.
Yeah.
Yes, you like yesterday I was in sweatpants all day, and then we're gonna go to the supermarket, and we don't go to the supermarket around here because there's so many infections in this area. So
Yeah.
we grab the car and we go to Connecticut to the supermarket, which normally would take you an hour and 15 minutes. Yesterday it took us half an hour because there's absolutely no traffic.
Crazy.
So to the supermarket, then I wore my nice pants. It's like,
Why not? I
my
would.
pants, I have to say. Yeah, so it's just a very surreal number of things that are happening on a daily basis. And of course, you want to keep informed, so you want to read and watch the news, but at the same time, it's just so depressing. Every time there's really not that much light.
I've got one good news. A 106-year-old person recovered from the coronavirus. So.
Yeah, I saw that. You shared it this morning.
Yeah, because I thought I'd share some good news at least.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So.
I mean, here in New York, it's supposedly the curve is being flattened a little bit in the sense that there are not as many people going into hospitals.
Yeah.
Right. As there were in a few days. Of course, there's still a lot of deaths because of all the people that were already in the hospitals. But it doesn't seem like they're admitting a large number of people as before. So hopefully the predictions were not as dire, or the situation is not as dire as the predictions were.
Yeah. So the other day, for the first time ever, I watched a United States presidential press conference. And Donald Trump was saying that a lot of healthcare workers in New York have the equipment that they need. But on the other side, I've watched stories of people who have to reuse masks for multiple days in a row. And have you heard anything about that? Or
yeah, of
do you
course.
have any comments on it? Or
actually, the best press conferences you can tune into to actually understand a little bit of what's going on, especially in New York, is the governor, Andrew Cuomo. He's been doing an incredible job. Every morning he gets on for a couple of hours with graphs, and he really explains everything well. And those are the ones people have been tuning into, because when you tune into Donald Trump's is just propaganda. He's basically trying to rewrite history and his response. What is going on? Everything is great. There's never been a response quite like the one we've had. We've never been as prepared in history. I mean, it's just all the superlatives that he uses constantly to try to make it seem like he's been doing great.
Yeah. Whatever the subject, he always says, "Oh, we're great. Everything's happened. Great, excellent. We're doing great." It doesn't matter what it is.
Exactly, and then he has his team of cronies, which are always thanking him for the incredible job he's been doing, no matter what the subject is, like you say. So and reporters have been taking him on a lot more. Because he keeps repeating the same lies, and they're like, no, but I'm sorry, and they keep asking things that make him absolutely angry and mad, and he lashes out at them. Like,
exactly.
This one instance of this reporter that asked him, so what would you say to the American people that are really scared right now? What would you say to them to calm them down? And he's like, what kind of question is that? You're a terrible reporter. You should be ashamed yourself. Because everything he feels is a personal attack, and a lot of times obviously feel like it's an attack because it is. They're asking him for some kind of explanation of why he did things the way he did them, And of course, in his mind, everything it's incredible and everything is great, and the virus is just going to disappear once it gets a little warmer over here. So it's just really maddening every time. It's like watching an alternative reality. When you're watching his press conferences. So
it's like the Twilight Zone. It is.
Exactly.
But it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
But going back to the situation in New York, I mean, the governor has been asking the federal government for supplies, for masks, for ventilators, and what the federal government has been doing is telling the states you have to get them from private companies.
Yeah.
So and that's usually what happens, obviously. But what happens is usually the federal government gets all the equipment necessary, and then the federal government distributes the equipment to the states depending on a need basis. So what the government said, no, you guys figure it out. So then California is bidding against New York, against New Orleans, and against Chicago, with a couple of private companies that have the ventilators. So they're trying to outbid each other. And then the federal government, which is FEMA, which is the disaster response department, basically, he comes in and outbids everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just insanity. So the governor of New York, Cuomo, was saying, how is this a smart thing to do? You make us outbid each other as states, and then you step in as the government and outbid everybody else because obviously they have the money. So it's the process and the bureaucracy of how things are working is just making everything be 6 weeks late as needed to be. So it's just incredible.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's really crazy. Yeah.
That's why we're trying to keep positive, because if we just talk about the government all the time, it just depresses you so much, and we don't know what to do. It's like, how can we do something about it?
Yeah. And also you brought up the point a few minutes ago that he says whenever it gets hotter here, it will go away. I've seen many reports saying that that's not true, because places like India and Israel, where it's much hotter than it would ever get in some of the states, there's still a crazy amount of cases and deaths. Like,
exactly.
But he's saying it like he's a medic and it's facts when it isn't.
He's the furthest thing from an expert on anything. I mean, that's the incredible thing, that this administration has completely vilified science and math and knowledge, and has traded in for this idiot and his son-in-law that are handling everything. Jared Kushner, he's not only handling peace in the Middle East, but he's also part of the response of the coronavirus. It's like, the amount of unprepared people right now in charge is just frightening.
I know, it's amazing. It's like me trying to be in charge of the government, because I wouldn't know what the hell to do.
Exactly.
I would not be in charge.
Exactly. It's like really, if you put one of those, like our fathers or our grandfathers, like, oh man, if I was president, I would get the troops out of Afghanistan like in a heartbeat. And all of a sudden, they're president. Yeah. And that's exactly what they do, without thinking about anything else except of their whims. So that's exactly what is happening with Trump, unfortunately.
What it is, it's a business, isn't it, with Trump?
Yeah.
And being president. That's what it is. And that's...
Well, and the thing is, you can maybe treat it as a business, but the thing is, it's all for his own good. It's not for the good of the country.
Oh yeah, it's for him. Definitely for him.
It's all for him. So if he treated it as a business and he wanted to make the corporation that he sees the United States as succeed, then it would be one thing. But he's just thinking about how he's going to fare, his popularity and his bank account. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we'll go away from Corona for a little bit,
Please.
and ask you some questions about yourself. Like, so how did you start in your career in music, become music composer and jazz drummer?
Well, it was just because of really my family. You know, my
Okay.
mother specifically. My mother, she's from the Woodstock, you know, generation,
Yeah.
flower child. So
Okay.
she used to listen to great music constantly. So the great bands from that era, Led Zeppelin, Janis Joplin, the
Yeah.
Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix. She was really into all of that, and by
That's good.
default, that's what I would listen to. So my uncle had this girlfriend that had a brother that was a drummer. So once I was hanging out with my uncle when I was a kid, and we went to his girlfriend's house, and this guy's drums were just sitting
Yeah.
right there in the living room, and I saw them, and this guy played a little bit, and I just completely fell in love with drums right from the beginning. I was 5 years old, and
Yeah.
you know, never really looked back after that, which is really amazing, because I had such a head start of, you know, getting into something so early on that I was really in love with. And then composition, I was always curious about it. You know, we used to have a Spanish guitar at home because we didn't have a piano, and I would just grab it and try to make up little tunes. And then later, they got me a piano, and I was always, you know, I was always composing, and I was always improvising as well on the drums. I love playing along to records and stuff like that, but I used to love free form improvisation afternoons where I would just be basically just trying to get to know the instrument better. So that was my process when I was younger.
Did you learn by ear then, or theory?
For a while, yes. Then I started taking piano lessons. Then I was taking and I was taking drum lessons with a couple of teachers, including the guy who owned this first drum set that I saw, whose name was Fito. So he would just teach me how to grab the sticks and then how to play along with some of my favorite albums. Then I started studying with a couple other people that taught me a little bit more about technique. And then I got myself into the Conservatory of Music in Mexico, but to study piano, classical piano, because around that time I saw the movie Amadeus by Milos Forman, and it just absolutely obsessed me, you know, and I wanted to be like Mozart. So then I got obsessed with the piano, and I wanted to learn how to play the piano and how to compose. But in the meantime, I was still always playing drums, and I had my little bands and stuff like that.
Which instruments do you prefer, piano or drums?
No, I mean, drums was always my first instrument, and is the one that I really feel like I know what I'm doing. Piano, you know, I used to play classical pieces a lot, and then I started getting more into jazz, but I never became proficient in jazz. Like I cannot sit down and play you know, an amazing jazz standard with the beautiful reharmonizations. I cannot do that, but I can sit down and compose slowly and come up with interesting things harmonically and melodically, but not in real time. You know, it's just for composing at this point.
That's the same thing. I'm like that as well with my keyboard. I can't really do like complicated jazz stuff, but I keep it. I can do a tune and it sounds, you know, good. Scott and Andrew, you know, what type of music I do. So
yeah. I mean, to me, what happened is that I became somewhat proficient on the piano, playing, you know, Mozart and Debussy and Chopin. I love those composers, but I was always practicing drums, and I was always playing drums. So later, when I finished my, well, I actually didn't finish because the conservatory was 8.5 years that you had to go through, and I did 4.5, and then I moved to Boston in 1993 to go to Berklee College of Music to study drums. So then I stopped playing the piano, and then little by little I started losing, my proficiency. So every time I wanted to sit on the piano and play like Chopin the way I used to, it wouldn't come out. So then I started getting bummed out, and I started doing it less and less and less until I kind of lost all of that proficiency, and now I just use it to compose mainly.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so born in Mexico, what was the earliest memory of jazz that you have, and like how did your love for music develop?
Yeah, my earliest memory of jazz is funny because while I was in my Led Zeppelin, Rush, and The Police phase,
Yes.
which those three bands were the bands that I was really really into for a long time.
Those are my some of my favorite bands. Just
exactly, I mean, anybody that likes good music and went through rock and roll usually goes through those bands. But
like
in the meantime, my mom tried to play me an Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers record, and I thought it was horrible. I thought it was the most hideous thing I ever heard, because it just didn't have a backbeat, and the production value that I was used to. It just sounded like an old recording of some old people playing old music. And it took me a long time to come back to all of that and really appreciate it for what it was.
Yeah, like being Canadian and everything, Rush is like one of the bands that you would always hear growing up. Like
of course,
Neil Peart is one of my favorite drummers of all time.
Yeah, who, by the way, the day he passed away, it was I was really really bugged out that day.
Well, same with me. I was bummed out. Like I threw on Moving Pictures because that's my favorite Rush album. I listened to it start to finish. Like it's such a masterpiece, that album.
Yeah, and usually when somebody's sick for a long time, then you kind of expect it. But he really was such a private guy that
he blamed like not touring on arthritis for the longest time. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand.
Yeah.
How it would have been an outpour of attention. If he announced it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you mentioned that you like the Police also. They're very they kind of have like a mixed style of music. It's kind of rock mixed with
Jamaican.
Yeah, well, yeah, kind
sort of that.
Yeah, the reggae is definitely
reggae.
Yeah,
ska. They liked a lot of reggae.
Yeah,
and I love that kind of music too, like where you get two very mixed genres of music together.
Yeah, and I think that's why I really started gravitating towards jazz. Because it's one of the most malleable kinds of music that you can find. It really kind of can take anything. It can take classical, it can take rock, it can take all kinds of Latin infused music, Arabic, Middle Eastern. You can really mix it pretty much with anything. Of course, there's people that have really found ways of doing it beautifully, and then there's some horrible versions of everything, as you will find on any kind of music.
Yeah,
but it does have that malleability that makes it very, very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, it's quite open to many things, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah, it can really take on a lot of things, and it's interesting now that I'm writing more music for film and all that stuff, because you don't hear jazz harmonies in film that much, it's always challenging for me to try to find a middle ground in between what I hear in my head and then what the film scoring world usually likes hearing.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know, it's just such established sound sometimes that film has when it comes to classical music, orchestral music, that to try to get in some different things in there, sometimes people frown upon it, and I think that's a little bit what happened with Birdman, with the Academy. That it was so different and so weird and something they were not used to at all, that a lot of people liked it. It definitely made an impression.
Maybe
but also
it was too ahead of its time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, because people dug it, and it worked, and it got.
I liked it.
I think.
Anyway.
I think the attention it got was good in general.
Yeah.
It was not like, oh my God, what is this piece of garbage? Which could have been, but it wasn't. So I think it's obviously the way Iñárritu mixed it in the film, and the everything kind of worked together. But the Academy was definitely very wary of it. So they, in our eyes, the people that worked in the film, they were quick to dismiss it, as fast as possible, because they I don't think they wanted it in the mix of contenders that year.
I think if Birdman was now, if they did it now, it'd probably be, it'd be fine. They wouldn't be negative towards it. Then.
Yeah, maybe. But in the moment, they gave two really strange excuses to eliminate it from contention. So that's why we're like, oh, I think that they just really don't want it near their orchestral composers,
Yeah. So
what was it like working on Birdman though? What was it like, your first?
I was amazed. It was, I mean, I was very wary of what it could become, because it hadn't really been done like that before, not in a high-profile movie, and the plot and the story of the film itself and the way it's shot, everything is kind of weird about it. So it was not. When I read the script for the first time, I didn't get it, because it's a strange script. It's a strange movie to begin with, and then
you kind of have to watch it more than once just to get the full idea of it, I suppose.
Exactly that, but also imagine reading it and reading it in a script form. You're not reading a book where they really explain everything. You're just kind of reading dialogue and a little bit of context, but that's it. So when I read the script, I was like, oh my God, what am I getting into? But of course, my trust in Iñárritu was absolute. So I thought, no matter what he did, at least it was going to be interesting and innovative. So the process was very interesting too, because we recorded the whole thing without having anything to look at yet. So we recorded just by talking about it, by analyzing each scene in such a way that it would create a vision in my head, so that I could improvise over it. So that's how we did the whole movie first, and then once they had shot it, and I had a rough cut of the film to look at, then we redid the whole thing. And then Iñárritu, by then, he had a very clear idea of the things that he liked from our first run and the things he wanted changed. And one of the things he wanted changed was the sound of the drums, because on the original session that we did, when we worked off of the script, the drum sounded very pristine and like, in a recording studio, they sounded really good. So he didn't like that they sounded so good. So he
likes it a bit raw.
We wanted to change the sound of the drums, to make it sound more, just beat up, and like they've been in storage for 50 years, because this happens in the bowels of an old Broadway theater. So It was a very interesting process, and I still didn't get it while we were doing it, and when I saw the first rough cut, I still didn't. The movie didn't hit me. It hit me the first time when I saw it in the movie theater, like a year later.
Yeah.
With surround sound and everything the way it was supposed to be, then that's when it really hit me, and I realized what an incredible piece of film it was.
Cool.
Oh wow,
that's awesome. So we just passed the 30-minute mark, but I do have one more question, if that's all right.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would like to share with somebody who wants to pursue a career in music or film? Like, is there any advice that you would give them? Or...
Well, I feel like given the current situation, any kind of advice I have is completely obsolete, because now world just changed, and we don't know when the world is going to return to any kind of normalcy.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that just now, like my wife and another friend, because we're finding that we're going to have to reinvent ourselves in ways that are not even in our radar right now. All these things that we're going to have to do online for a while now, and I think, unfortunately, the last things that are going to come back are concerts, mass gatherings, anything that where you have to get a bunch of people in one place at the same time. It's going to be the last thing to come back. So, concerts that were being reprogrammed for the fall, now they're being reprogrammed for next fall. So it's going to be very interesting how this happens, and how it shapes up if a vaccine doesn't come on the market soon, because I think that would change everything. Just to know that, okay, even if I get sick, there's this thing that I can get that is going to make me okay. Then that would change people's mentality. But if you go anywhere and you're afraid of getting sick, and you're afraid of going to the hospital and getting more sick there, and there's no ventilators, all this psychological aspects of the disease that are going to affect our livelihood for a very, very long time. Is not the same as staying home and working from home if you're in working some kind of business where you can do that. But in a business where that depends on, first of all, traveling, we have to travel all over the place in order to perform, and then once you get there, you have to get a bunch of people in the same place at the same time. So those are the two things that are probably gonna have the most the lasting effect, this whole thing on our industry. So, my advice is, okay, if you're thinking about pursuing it, of course you have to follow your heart. That's a given. You have to do what you want to do, and then adapt to whatever is happening. But
the situation.
The situation is something unlike we've ever seen before. And I want to be optimistic and think that a year from now, things are going to start to look more or less the same, with improvements, hopefully, in healthcare, in sick paid leave, in Social Security, all the things that are becoming so obvious, especially in the United States, that are lacking and that always been lacking. But the thing is, we've never been in a situation like this where it makes it so obvious, And unfortunately, the losers are always poor people, So those people are the ones that are always getting the end of the bad end of the deal, no matter what it is. So I don't know. I hope that the next government that comes around is smart enough to be like, okay, we must learn from all this disaster that just happened, or that we're still in, and try to take better care of people in this country. It's a very selfish and greedy country, and I hope that changes.
I was hoping Bernie Sanders would get in there, but if you're going to get someone, just get Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders can work with him, and
Yeah, I mean, anybody that
anyone.
anyone except this guy at this point, really.
An old stick in the garden could do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Going back to your question, I think the best piece of advice I could give is, obviously you have to have all your skills ready. You have to be great at what you do. You have to aspire to be great, but also nowadays you have to really diversify in how to get your product out there. You have to become an expert in social media and digital solutions and video and audio, and you have to be a producer. You have to do all these things that before you could just play. Just going to perform and play all over the place with a bunch of different people. That's not the case anymore. It really has changed a lot since I started. And now you have to be, a jack of all trades, and you have to be as you ever were performing, but you also have to produce and mix and record and know how to do video and edit, all those things that the millennials are really good at that, because they were born with that. But my generation and generations after me, a lot of people don't even know how to do Skype, still. So it's something that you really have to kind of learn if you want to stay current in this environment, in this new age.
Well, it's happened with music as well. You've got to adapt to anything technology-wise. Yeah. So it's just learning. If you've got the patience to learn, then I suppose.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was
my pleasure.
Was a very nice podcast. So yeah, I'll see you guys later on. I have to head off for actually the briefing of what's going on this island for the
good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, mostly, everybody, you guys out there and everybody out there, I really hope you're all taking care of yourselves and taking this seriously, as I think a lot of people are now.
Same to you and your family.
Thank you. And let me know when this is ready, and I'll be more than happy to share it everywhere.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot.
Bye, guys.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
You have a good day. You too.